Edgar Markov, the esteemed founder of the Markov bloodline, and the first to embrace the dark and eternal existence of vampirism upon the grim plain of Innistrad, was not always so. In his youth, he had been a man of considerable intellectual ambition, and though his outward appearance suggested the dignity of age, his mind burned with a singular desire to conquer the limitations of time, to secure for himself and his beloved grandson Sorin a life unbound by the fleeting nature of mortal existence. In those long ago years, when the land was ravaged by famine and despair, Edgar, a learned alchemist, sought a solution not through the gentle arts of medicine or nature's bounty, but through the more hazardous and dubious realm of dark experimentations. In those days, Innistrad had been in turmoil, its people struggling to survive the cruel hand of nature and the diminishing resources upon which they depended. It was in this time of scarcity that Edgar, in his desperation, found himself approached by a demon of no small malevolence, known to the world by the name of Shilgangar. This demon, with his smooth words and promises of grandeur, persuaded the alchemist to partake in a forbidden ritual, one that promised the secrets of immortality. It was a bargain of a most grievous kind, wherein Edgar's mortal soul was entwined with the dark forces of the other world. Yet, as is often the case with such bargains, the consequences were far more dire than Edgar could have foreseen. The ritual involved the cruelest of deeds, an act of horror that would echo through the bloodline of Edgar's family for generations to come. In the darkest recesses of his laboratory, Edgar and his sons captured an angel of great beauty and purity, a creature of light and grace. This angel, Marich, was subjected to a fate so gruesome as to be beyond comprehension. Her life was drained entirely, her blood harvested for a decoction that would grant those who partook of it an eternal existence. The ritual worked, but not in the way Edgar had anticipated. The transformation of his subjects was not one of simple agelessness, but of vampirism, a curse that condemned those who embraced it to an unyielding thirst for blood, and to an existence that was both cursed and yet eternal. Thus Edgar Markov, along with his sons, became the first vampires of Innistrad, beings of darkness and power who roamed the land, feeding upon the blood of others to sustain their unnatural lives. Yet this gift, if one could call it that, came at a terrible cost. For though the vampires of Edgar's line were immortal, they were also ever in need, ever hungry, and the demand for blood created a cycle of violence and death that could never be fully sated. The very act that had brought Edgar and his kin immortality was the seed of destruction for Innistrad, as the constant thirst for blood led to the devastation of the land and the decimation of its people. It was in the midst of this dark transformation that Edgar's grandson Sorin found himself reluctantly drawn into the abyss. Sorin, though a young man, was far from ignorant of his grandfather's ways, and when Edgar, in his desperation to secure his legacy, forced Sorin to undergo the same transformation, the result was nothing short of catastrophic. The process, though successful in creating another vampire, had an unintended consequence. The pain and trauma of the transformation ignited within Sorin a spark, an unimaginable power that set him on a path that would take him far from his family and from the world he had known. Sorin's planeswalker spark, once awakened, sent him to distant planes, never to return to Innistrad save for brief and rare visits, during which he would check on the state of the world and the family he had left behind. And yet, despite his grandson's absence, Edgar continued to exist in the shadow of his own immortality, growing weary of the world around him. As centuries passed, Edgar withdrew further from the affairs of the world, retreating to the vaults of Markov Manor, where he slumbered in his coffin for many years, allowing the world to change around him. It was during these long periods of rest that Sorin would occasionally leave books for his grandfather, works that served to inform Edgar of the current state of Innistrad and its people. And though Sorin would return from time to seek counsel from his grandfather, their conversations were never without a certain distance, a gap between them that could not be bridged. Edgar, in his vast age and bitterness, found little to admire in his grandson's naivety, and Sorin, despite the power he had gained, could not fully understand the depths of Edgar's weariness and despair. But change, as it often does, came once more to the Markov family. It arrived in the form of Olivia Voldaren, a rival vampire of no small repute, who sought to claim Edgar's power for herself. She stole Edgar's coffin and, in a most devious plot, orchestrated a wedding in order to awaken him from his slumber. Edgar, confused by his sudden awakening, found himself charmed by Olivia and, in his befuddlement, agreed to marry her. This union, which was supposed to strengthen Olivia's position and solidify her hold over Innistrad, was interrupted by none other than Sorin, who, despite the years of estrangement, still sought to protect his family's legacy. In the ensuing chaos, the spirit of Catilda, an ancient being tied to the Markov bloodline, manifested and freed the angel Sigarda, whose fury caused great destruction. In the heat of the battle, Edgar found himself at odds with his grandson once more. They fought fiercely, words of recrimination and sorrow exchanged between them as they clashed. Edgar, in his bitterness, expressed his disappointment in Sorin, accusing him of wasting his potential. Sorin, torn between his love for his family and the painful reality of his grandfather's decisions, struggled to reconcile his past with the man who had once been his mentor. The battle raged on, and though Edgar proved no match for his empowered grandson, Sorin chose mercy over vengeance. With a great sword in hand, he overpowered Edgar but allowed him to live, ordering him to leave and never return. Edgar, ever stubborn and proud, withdrew with Olivia, who had her own plans for the future. But even in defeat, Edgar was not finished. The dark threads of his life had not yet unraveled, and his machinations would continue, even as he fled the scene of their final confrontation. Thus, Edgar Markov, ever the enigmatic and tragic figure, lived on, his immortal soul bound by the sins of his past and the burdens of his bloodline. He was a man who had sought to escape the limits of mortality, only to find himself ensnared by his own creations. His legacy, like the land he once called home, was one of sorrow, conflict, and a longing for something that could never be reclaimed. And as long as the bloodline of Markov endured, so too would the tale of Edgar, a tale of ambition, regret, and the eternal struggle against time itself.